3, 2, 1. Hey. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to Living Color with Matt Woodward, episode number 14. It's a lot to get to on this episode. This is probably the most jam-packed one that I've had yet. I can't even really tell you how many things I have really to talk about here. So I might as well just get right to it. I was just really thinking about, like, in the past week, because it's really been almost a week since I've recorded last. I think it was like last Saturday night is when I recorded, almost into like Sunday morning there. And so I was just kind of thinking of, like, the impact of, like, the whole protests and the whole Black Lives Matter movement so far, because it's been about, I believe, a little over 2 weeks now since the tragic and horrific death of or murder, I should say, really, because it was murder, of George Floyd, and really the subsequent, like, events that followed and the protests, many of which were peaceful, and then they were kind of hijacked by just people with, like, a whole separate different agenda that weren't really a part of, what the protests were about to begin with. But just kind of seeing, like, all the different, like, positive, like, changes that have happened since, and just, like, really, like, just looking at, like, the scope of the impact of, like, the protests around the country so far. You're just kind of seeing that, like, Black Lives Matter is being, like, painted on major, like, roads and major streets in cities across the country and towns across the country, all the way leading, including in, like, Washington, D.C. I'm not really sure what street it was in Washington, D.C., but it was like they painted, like, Black Lives Matter all leading all the way up to the White House, and I believe other cities and towns are like not only painting, like, Black Lives Matter, but they're also, like, creating, like, a mural with it as well, to kind of go along with it. Also, like, just kind of add on to the message of it. And you also see that, like, Walmart just kind of announced that they were gonna get, like, they had multicultural hair products that were locked away, that were predominantly used by people of different cultures, apparently, as they put it, and those were apparently locked away. But I guess, hair products that were mainly used by white people, I guess, weren't being locked away for years. And I guess Walmart had to, they just kind of came out and made that statement that they were gonna, unlock those kind of products. And then you're just kind of seeing these major brands and businesses, including the Jordan brand and Michael Jordan. They just announced, I believe it was this week, a pledge for $100 million over the next 10 years, to, like, organizations and foundations that benefit, like, like Black communities and programs. So there's just been, like, a ton that's really happened. Even it's almost even in the city where this all kind of took place to begin with, like Minneapolis. I mean, not to say that this hasn't been building up for years, because it really has been. I've talked about that in, like, the kind of the past couple episodes where, we've been seeing these horrific acts, been going on since at least, like, 2014, 2015. And, it always just kind of got swept under the rug, and, no real change ever was made. Certainly no change, in the judicial system, I guess you'd say, or, in making laws. There was really no changes in that regard. And that's kind of where you would hope to see it the most, because, it's been, the laws have certainly targeted, not only Black communities, but, like, communities of just minorities and, poor communities for years. And the laws have targeted those communities in such a way that even now you just kind of see that the Minneapolis Police Department, I believe it was the Minneapolis City Council, voted to disband the police department, I believe, which is sort of when you hear the word disband a police department, it's automatically kind of like a radical thing, obviously, and even still, you just out kind of where I'm at here, you kind of see that the Denver School Board, they voted to cut their ties with the Denver Police Department, and that's happened all across the country as well. You saw that even in Minneapolis with the University of Minnesota, they completely cut their ties, I believe, with the Minneapolis Police Department following the whole George Floyd murder. And I'm sure it's only kind of the beginning of those like conversations. You're seeing it really all around the country at this point. I know like back home in like Vermont, Governor Phil Scott, he kind of came out against it. He was saying that he's not even really considering, obviously, defunding the police or disbanding the police department. And it's not. I don't think disbanding obviously isn't really the solution. At least to me, it's not. I do believe that like when you see some of these budgets that some of these police departments have, like I think it was the San Diego Police Department has like a $550 million budget or near $600 million budget. Like, you got to be shitting me. Like, what are they in San Diego? Like, they need $600 million. Are we sure? Are we really sure? And like not even $5 million of that could go to somewhere else. Maybe some K through 12 lunch programs. I know I saw like a picture of that on like Twitter. It's like San Diego Police Department has like a $500 million budget, and then you see like a picture of like what is average school lunch is for like a kid that goes to a public school in the San Diego County or whatever. And it's like the mac and cheese. It looks like prison food, like almost worse than prison food. And you're like, okay, this is what we're paying for with our tax money. Is like So when I hear like disbanding, like I don't think like you should just get rid of the police altogether, obviously, because when something happens, you do need somebody to call. You need someone to kind of look to. But at the same time, the trust and the relationship, I feel like has kind of been frayed to such a degree, and certainly in so many different communities and states. That I don't know if it's like a rebranding kind of thing. I don't know if it's like I don't know. I don't really know what the next step would be in that kind of direction, but I think maybe diverting some of the funds so that maybe it doesn't come. I mean, it's one thing to come off as being militarized, but it's pretty clear that it seems like every damn police department's militarized. You see that they're showing up in riot gears and not even cities, and like and just towns almost, so. I don't know, and you can't you have to kind of build that trust back up, right? You can't give off the impression that you're like an army invading your own community. Like I don't know. I think I said on like a previous episode that I think one solution should be that police departments should hire locally. I feel like obviously certain communities might not have like a talent pool that's rich and, well trained and well educated officers, or, that are young and qualified, I guess, that meet the qualifications. But that's the same thing. When you hear like a $500 million budget or something like that, when you're spending that much and then you hear that they're not trained properly, how the hell are they not trained properly? What the hell are they spending that money on? Like tanks or some shit? Like, how are they not trained properly on a $500 million budget? Or, I mean, that's obviously just one city, but that's obviously happening in cities across the globe, because I'm assuming, or at least in the United States, like I'm assuming New York City and Los Angeles and the cities with a much higher population, a much denser population in such a small area, I'm assuming their budgets are, exorbitant, like well beyond that $500 million. And it might be, it's justified because, it, in certain instances, but, maybe it isn't when you're hearing that they're not being trained properly. It's like, okay, well, how is that happening? Who's training them? Who's running the show to begin with? And that kind of just makes you question it overall when you see like that Buffalo protester, that 75-year-old man, get pushed to the ground, and then they initially came out trying to say that he fell over or he tripped or whatever the hell they were saying. And then the video came out, and they kind of had to retract it, obviously, because it was pretty damn clear that he got pushed by a couple bozos, But yeah, no, I hate to keep rambling, but there's a ton to really go through with this. Just like within the past couple weeks, and there's been a lot of positive changes. You just see that it's like I wouldn't say that this is necessarily positive change. It goes along with really the topic is that when you see Seattle protesters take over, I think it's a 7-block radius in the city of Seattle. And there's no money allowed. There's no police allowed, certainly. There's no laws. They took over the East Police Precinct in Seattle. And there's people basically guarding it, walking around with, weapons and rifles. And they clearly don't give a damn. Which is wild. I don't know how that's really happening right now, but so when I see something like what's happening in Seattle, I don't know how long does that last? They just took over 7 blocks in the middle of the city. And I don't know if that's obviously Seattle's kind of a unique place, to begin with, obviously. There's a lot going on there. But yeah, I just, it just doesn't make sense. I just wonder how do they get that back? What in the world? How in the world do you just take over 7 blocks in the middle of a city like Seattle? Like I said, it's obvious. Seattle's kind of a unique city to begin with, but I just don't. They're guarding it with rifles, and there's no money allowed. There's no police allowed. It just seems pretty. It seems. I don't know what they're gonna do to get it back. I don't know what they're gonna do to get the police precinct back. That's for damn sure. I don't know how that's ever going to come back, but especially what are they, people are guarding it with guns. What are you going to do? Meet force with force, right? I don't understand. But I haven't really seen too many videos coming out of there. Obviously, I haven't really looked for them, but there's been just a ton of viral videos I feel lately, just about it seems just crazy, it's white people just losing their minds, just old white people just losing their absolute minds over almost nothing. Just people just walking down the street with a sign, just that might not agree with what they think, and they just absolutely are losing out here. I've seen one dude, I think it was in New Jersey, who was basically reenacting George Floyd's murder to just a group of protesters walking by, and they caught him on video, obviously, and that's the thing. I don't think these people realize that when they're doing this dumb shit like that, not only is it going viral, and people are so fast to, be able to identify who you are, what you do, where you live, who your relatives are. They can look you up on Facebook instantly. All they need is really a name and then your location. Obviously, anybody really knows that at this point, and these people, they're not afraid out here. I mean, it's obviously embarrassing, but you almost gotta give them a little credit because they're so damn dumb. It looks like that they're just out here, basically ruining their lives. That, there's one dude in Texas, I think, last week with a chainsaw when he was walking, screaming at people, and I think he had his company truck right behind him when he pulled out a chainsaw from his truck and was obviously, screaming racial slurs at people and then screaming profanities and telling people that the media is lying to him, and the dude has his company truck right behind him. What a fucking idiot. I don't know how. Obviously these people aren't the brightest in the world. If they get mad at the most basic human I don't even know. Like, just the most basic human situation. You just watch somebody get murdered in, like, the most egregious, disgusting way on camera for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And you try to justify, well, he had a criminal history. He was a bad guy. Did you see what he did to that pregnant chick in Houston? Who gives a fuck, dude? And you just watch that guy get murdered? Like, if that was your family member, you're damn sure you'd be out there in that street with yelling, right? And then would you want someone to justify that? And now you got people trying to, people that try to justify that shit. It's the same ones that, I don't know. You can't throw everybody in a box, and you can't, label everybody, and because that's kind of part of the problem. I feel like, obviously, is that, when you just shut everybody down, like, oh, well, if they think this way, they'll vote for him, or they support this guy, and and even though most of the time that might, not most of the time, but sometimes that might be true, it shuts down like a conversation that has to be had, like this. Because you're never going to, like, move on from this. It'll just keep getting swept under the rug. And you'll have a bozo like, Trump try to change the narrative just like he did with Colin Kaepernick. Which is actually, like, that's what I'm saying. I had so many topics. I'm just going rambling on this. I literally have... I shouldn't be, like, talking, like, just rambling. Because I have about, like, 12 different topics I want to get to. Including the Colin Kaepernick. Like, will he get signed? But... I just kind of had to go off on this. And another thing that was, like, positive, getting back to, like, the positivity of it all was seeing, like, LeBron James and numerous, like, black athletes and entrepreneurs and entertainers created a nonprofit called More Than a Vote. And it's to encourage black voter turnout, stop, voter suppression, and protect black voter rights. Which is a massive thing, obviously, because, right now, I think that's like the biggest issue that we're facing right now is voter suppression, especially in marginalized communities, especially in, like, black communities, and, Latino communities, all those. Like, they almost just don't want you to vote. They really don't want you to vote, it seems like, right? There's these long lines, 5-7 hour waits in line to vote in 2020. Like, you can't just fill out a form on your phone. Like, you gotta wait 7 hours in line. They don't want you to vote, and then they turn you away. When I see shit like that is clearly the biggest problem that we're facing right now. I mean, I wouldn't say overall, but in terms of, like, how we're gonna not change things, but that's one of the biggest problems with our system right now is that there's the amount of voter suppression. You don't really know what's going on. You don't know who's telling the truth. That's like another thing. Like, when I think about it, there's really no one to vote for in November. And that sucks to say. Like, it's like I don't know. There's really who can you trust? You really can't trust the president of the United States right now, obviously. I didn't trust him before. You couldn't trust him before. I feel like if you just follow along and aren't, like, don't have your blinders on, it's pretty damn obvious at this point, right? But you can't really trust the president. You can't really trust the media. I think you can trust, local media to a certain extent, because those are hardworking, like, journalists who aren't making, a lot of money, and they're just trying to do their job and get the story and, try to get the facts right and, maybe try to, and they want to be first. Everybody wants to be first, but, they're just trying to be right and they're trying to get their job done and do the story, and it sucks when they're getting lumped in with people like, CNN and Fox News and MSNBC, because those are like they're so bad and they almost kind of reach around at the same ends, It's kind of everything on CNN is breaking news. Have you ever turned the channel on CNN and not seen breaking news? I feel like I've never seen that before. It's literally everything to them is just breaking news, And then if you look at Fox News, no matter what Trump does, he's never wrong, Then you look at that fucking idiot Laura Ingraham or whatever her name is, how she's saying that Drew Brees, he should have his own opinion, and this might hurt the team chemistry and all that bullshit. But she was telling LeBron James to shut up and dribble, back in like 2015, 2016, 24, whatever it was. Like, so there's so much hypocrisy and all that shit, and there's just no one to trust. It sucks. But I'm happy to see like LeBron, I think he will be remembered as more than an athlete. He's kind of an icon at this point. He really is. He's a global icon. He's like a human icon, really. He hasn't really messed up once in this modern age, right? You think about it. LeBron James, the only real knock that he ever really had was the decision when he decided to take his talents to South Beach, and did it on ESPN. He had an ESPN special. And even still, that wasn't really that bad. Like, it was all kind of like a marketing thing for him to kind of increase his brand, increase his awareness. I mean, he was probably the biggest athlete on the planet at the time, and why not? He was free to do whatever he wants, and especially if a network like ESPN's willing to put that on, who would not do that? So people are just knocking him because it's LeBron, and I think he's not only one of the greatest basketball players of all time and one of the greatest athletes of all time. I think he'll go down as one of the greatest. I don't want to say, maybe, yeah, fuck it. He might go down as one of the greatest black leaders of all time, right? You think about it, like in terms of athletes, right? He's like perfected like an image. Like his image is like it's perfect. He's multifaceted in so many ways. He's not afraid to speak out on very touchy issues that directly impact communities that he came from, like Akron, Ohio. And he is one of the greatest, not only black athlete, obviously one of the greatest athletes of all time. Black athlete, what the fuck is that? One of the greatest athletes of all time, and I think when he's saying he wants to be remembered as more than an athlete, I think he will, no doubt. I think no doubt about it, he will. I think there's really no doubt. And another thing that's, I think it's a positive that's happened with all of this is that you see that NASCAR finally banned the Confederate flag. It's something that they should have done forever ago, but it's better late than never at this point. Like they could have done it years ago, but they didn't want to obviously alienate a potential large portion of their fan base. Unfortunate as that is. They didn't want to alienate them, obviously, and it made sense probably business wise, but it probably hurt them, brand wise, and in terms of popularity, because at a certain point they probably had to realize that those fans are going to die out, and they need to appeal to a younger generation, right? Which is kind of why you don't want to give them too much credit, because it's like they're trying to save their ass and save their bottom dollar, because in the end, 10 years from now, they're going to have to appeal to a much younger generation than they already have to now. And even now, a generation like mine, I'm only 27. I really don't give a damn about NASCAR, and I only know like one person really who actually gives a damn and watches. So they need to appeal obviously to a younger fan base, and once Bubba Wallace, I believed, I think he's the only African American driver, I believe, only black driver right now in NASCAR, and once Bubba Wallace really took the stand, it was, I think NASCAR kind of had to listen, in the same way that the NFL had to listen once they saw Patrick Mahomes in that video with all the, star black NFL players, trying to take a stand against, the NFL's lack of acknowledging Colin Kaepernick and, police brutality and what their whole mission and goal was in the initial protests, peaceful protests. It's kind of the same thing here. Like, once NASCAR saw Bubba Wallace take that stand where they're like, we need to ban all Confederate flags. That shouldn't be around, Like I shouldn't have to worry about that. Like I'm paraphrasing obviously what he's saying, but it made sense to eventually move in that direction. Like, hey, we need to take this step. It's only right. So I'm happy NASCAR did, but then you see that one bum, that one bum NASCAR driver, man. What was his name? Rich. I can't remember. Begins with a C. He's such a bum. I can't remember. Hey, Rich, what were you, 0-28? You couldn't even finish in the top fucking 25? Did you ever finish in the top 25, you bum? This guy's such a local joker. He's like, I think he had his wife write the Facebook post or whatever saying he's quitting at the end of the year. Like, good riddance, bum. No one knew you to begin with. No one knew you, bum. Keep it moving. This local joker. I love it. I love that. And I can't wait to see all the NASCAR fans that are offended and that they won't show up. Peace out, bitches. That's what I gotta say. Like, you don't want. I don't want you in public either. You don't want to be in public as much. I don't want to see as much either. Not that anyone should see your old fucking fat ass. But yeah, and then now on top of not only that, look at that. I like that camera angle. Now on top of like it all. You kind of see that Confederate statues across the United States are finally being taken down. And it's about damn time, I'm not going to lie. I grew up a huge Civil War buff and like history buff. And I loved all of it. I loved learning about the war and wars and our nation's history, blah, 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 and all that. But then you kind of realize that, we got the way that we were taught our nation's history isn't really what our nation's history was like and was about, and then you kind of realize, you don't realize when you're young, like, and you go visit like a battlefield, because I've been to almost damn near, or my family and I had been to damn near every Civil War battlefield and a few Revolutionary War battlefields, and even the Civil War ones, like you kind of drive around and it'll be like, what statue is that, Dad? You ask and they'd be like, oh, it's a Confederate statue, and you're like, oh, what's that? And then you kind of learn later, you're like, they have statues in towns of Confederate soldiers and generals. Then you're like, oh yeah, they were fighting to secede from the Union, and I don't know, like I think it's about damn time. Like those statues, they do not belong in public. I've been saying it for a few years. They do not belong in public. They belong in either a museum or they belong in a history book. Now, I could see maybe keeping Confederate statues up at a battlefield, at battlefields, not in the town square or in the center of a town or anywhere like that, But maybe at a battlefield, I could see, like maybe keeping a Confederate statue there. But even then, it's kind of tough. It's kind of tough. It's tough to justify why they should still be standing in 2020. And even Christopher Columbus, that's another one. His statue was actually, I believe, it was beheaded in Boston, and it was taken down, I believe, in Providence in San Francisco. Where they're trying to take it down. Or protesters are trying to take it down. I know they defaced them. And it's being like guarded in New York City, by the NYPD. And that guy, obviously, that's another one where you just learn about the nation's history and you're like, oh, Christopher Columbus, he founded North America or whatever, or America. And then you realize that guy was just a total piece of shit and like committed like basically genocide against Native Americans and, was a liar and just was a horrible dude, man. And we have a day for Christopher Columbus. There's Columbus Day, and like it doesn't make sense to me. So it's good to see that we're finally making some progress. There's positive changes being made throughout all of this, and then you still have people that are still like, well, these protests aren't accomplishing anything, and you're like, really? Take a look around, dude. Maybe if you look around and aren't so like narrow-minded, you'll actually see that there's shit changing now. And it's about time. Because, you just can't have you can't have statues of people like that. It's especially of what are we teaching our kids? Like what are we learning in history? And how are we learning our history, right? Like, I don't know how did people ever get away with saying Christopher Columbus was a great dude? I mean, I don't know if that was ever the narrative, but it's so weird. Like, that dude is awful, man. I'm just trying to make sure I'm seeing where I'm all like caught up here, because I'm trying to make sure I'm going through everything. It's tough to make sure here. Oh yeah, okay, we're good. But even still, it's like getting back to I know I'm kind of all over the place a little bit, but I'm just like, I was just thinking like getting back to like Kaepernick, because it came out, I think it was earlier this week certainly, that Pete Carroll said that he regrets not signing him in 2017. And it's like you still could sign him now. Obviously would create a freaking whirlwind. But you could still sign him now. And he actually came out and said, I think this is the most intriguing part, is that he said one team called him recently to inquire about Kaepernick. And he obviously didn't mention the team, but that just kind of lets you know that one team may be interested. And it is kind of crazy. It's clear he got blackballed from the league and then people tried to say that he was falling off and he was declining in his numbers a little bit, but he was still a pretty damn solid quarterback. And when you watched him in like the NFC Championship game and even like the Super Bowl against the Ravens, he was solid, man. You're telling me that dude couldn't win a Super Bowl? It was obvious he could. He was kind of like Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes and all that before them, just obviously not as fast and, quick-footed and agile as Lamar Jackson. But even still, he had the whole package, He was like kind of like the initial one with the whole package, because the 49ers were doing their whole, read option off of Cap, because he was such a threat to run with the ball, and he has a freaking cannon. I think he got drafted in the MLB. He was throwing like 90-mile-an-hour fastballs. I remember watching him in college at Nevada. So I think I don't know. It's tough. Like I'd be easy to say I'd like to see him get signed, and I would, but I think it would create such a circus. The media is just a circus anyway. They look for a circus, and then they create the circus. I don't know. I don't really know. I do hope he gets signed, but is it likely? I don't think so. But when you hear Pete Carroll say that one team is interested at least, and one team called about him, he could be blowing smoke up our ass, but I don't know. I don't think so, because Cap's still kind of in his prime. He still could have something left, obviously, especially when you see so many bum quarterbacks that are in the league right now. Mainly in the backup role. There's like, he could probably step in the league right now and probably be the top 3 backup easily. Maybe Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill and, all right, top 5 backup. Ryan Fitzpatrick, all those guys maybe, but he's right in there. Andy Dalton, like, even still, I'd almost take him over half those guys. Haven't not even seen him play in years, just because such a what he was when he was on the field in that, like I said, in that NFC Championship form, when he was just absolutely tearing teams apart. Obviously, that was like 2012 or whatever it was, 2013 maybe, 2012 or 13. But still, I'd still give him I don't know if I'd give him a chance if I were a team, but I want to see a team give him a chance. That's kind of what I'm hoping. Another thing that is interesting is that Adrian Peterson was saying that, just about everyone around the league is prepared to take a knee before the anthem this season. They're all prepared to kneel before the national anthem. And that's interesting to hear. Obviously, Adrian Peterson, I believe he's still with the Washington Redskins, legendary running back in the NFL. And I kind of was thinking about that too. I was like, I wonder if people are gonna, get back to kneeling, and it makes sense that they will. And I believe the NFL kind of lifted their restriction or whatever on kneeling during the anthem. But obviously, I think it will create a stir again, especially if the president sees it. If he gets a hold of it, he'll try to spin the narrative like he always does. But it's gonna be interesting. Like it's like, how will the owners and GMs react? I think that's the key, because it's like, if it starts to hurt their bottom line again, well, how will they react? Will they stand behind the players? Because I feel like there's gonna be enough social pressure to, at this point, because everyone who's, I feel like everyone who has kind of a brain about them kind of knows what Kaepernick and Malcolm Jenkins and Eric Reed were all kneeling for, and there's obviously a reason. You see it time and time again, from 2014 to now. You see it still. Eric Garner in New York City selling loose cigarettes, to now George Floyd being murdered in the streets of Minneapolis, for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And that's why they're kneeling, and to see or to hear Adrian Peterson say that they're going to continue to kneel this season, and that they're fully prepared to, no matter what the repercussions or consequences. You got to support them, I feel like, at this point, because there's obviously a reason. It made, and I'm all for it, obviously.